السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'd like to welcome our special guest, Sheikh Muneer Abduroaf, and our honored attendees and guests who have joined us for this fourth session of Stepping into the Scholarsphere, a series of programs which intends to give a window of insight to ulama and students of knowledge as to the different roles they could play in the various fields of expertise. Today, alhamdulillah, we are fortunate to have an expert in the field of law, Sheikh Muneer Abduroaf. Sheikh is a graduate of the University of Medina and a graduate of University of Western Cape. He's just reading through his profile would take some time, and he is a leading scholar at the Muslim Judicial Council as well. So we are very fortunate to have Sheikh to talk to us on this topic this evening. My name is Safwan Navlaki, and I will be the host on behalf of Dean Pro. And I am tasked with hosting our honorable guest this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Sheikh, noting well that we have received several requests from ulama and students who cannot make the live session due to their studies and classes and so forth, but they look forward to the recording, which will be made available on YouTube as well in due course. So inshallah, the benefit of this program extends for a long time. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Sheikh Muneer to take us through the discussion, inshallah. We'll request our attendees to please post your questions using the Q&A box or the chat box, and inshallah they will be taken towards the end of the session. Bismillah.
Jazakallah Maulana for that introduction. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala khayri khalqillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Firstly, I'd like to thank Team Pro and the organizers for granting me the opportunity to share my experiences in the journey as a scholar in the Islamic scholar in the field of law. Inshallah, for my presentation this evening, I'll break it up into three parts. It's the background to my studies, and thereafter the career as a scholar in the field of law in the various institutions that I play a role in. And thereafter, inshallah, there can be a Q&A, inshallah. So I'll start off by giving a brief overview of myself. I basically here in Cape Town, and I've then embarked in my studies after matric in Syria, and there I have a bit of formal education in Islamic law, in Islamic studies in Damascus. Thereafter, I went to Medina University, where I enrolled for a Sharia law degree. But one of the prerequisites was that I should firstly be fluent in Arabic, as the medium of instruction is in Arabic language. So I did a diploma in Arabic law, in Sharia law, in Shu'bah, for the duration of 1 year, right? The level 3 and level 4 of the course. Thereafter, once I've completed that, I went into the Faculty of Sharia and did the Sharia law degree, which took 4 years. And thereafter, I graduated. My initial intention was to actually become a dentist thereafter, because I said, all right, I have my Islamic background, but it'll be nice to be a dentist as well. But then when I went into Sharia law, I saw that, no, it won't be a nice mix and match between Sharia law and dentistry, even though I could give some advice to my clients. My brother was an advocate, and I then said, no, but law is actually something which will match nicely. So I then thought of maybe doing a law degree. So when I came back to South Africa after 2009, I enrolled at the University of the Western Cape for a LLB law degree. And there basically I pursued my knowledge in secular law or in South African law. And I found it was quite nice to marry the two between the Islamic law that I have studied in Medina University and the South African law, family law, criminal law, succession law, and so forth. And once I completed my law degree, I saw that you have to do your articles after completing the law degree to find a law firm and so forth. So my experience was that in the meantime, I could further my studies as well. And there was a great opportunity at that point in time to do a law degree in international law. And there was at the University of the Western Cape a opportunity. There was a bursary also available that you could apply for by looking at international criminal law, international anti-money laundering law, and transnational justice and crime prevention. So those are quite interesting subjects. And also, I always looked at all of these laws with a focus of what I've done in Medina. So I said, well, what does Islam say concerning this? And I found there was quite a number of intersections, even with transitional justice, where countries in transition, like from South Africa would be from apartheid to democracy. And in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was when they came back to Mecca, and the question was, what do we do with all of these persons that were enemies of Islam? And the Prophet ﷺ, so that is something similar to the what happened in some countries where they just gave amnesty. Where South Africa again looked at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and so forth. So I did a bit of research in that regard, and that is where I tried to marry the two and look at it from an Islamic perspective again. Once I've completed my master's degree, I found that, okay, I have Islamic law, I have South African law, I have a bit of international law, and I've also done my articles 1 year with a law firm, with a local law firm. And to cut it down, the 2 years to 1 year, I did the UNISA Law School. All right, so and then you also have the exams, and you are able to write those 4 admission exams to become an attorney, an admitted attorney. So during that time, I've completed all of those things. And I found a liking for the law of succession or laws of inheritance, right? And then I met up with the previous dean of the law faculty at the University of Western Cape, Professor Najma Musa. Actually, during my master's studies, I actually did it as it was between 2 universities, Humboldt universities in Germany and University of Western Cape. They had some program. And we actually went to Germany as well and met the president of the International Criminal Court and so forth. It was a international criminal law master's. And she initiated that at the University of Western Cape. And when I came back, I then started to do a law degree, a doctoral law degree at the University of Western Cape in constitutional theory. And I wanted to then marry the South African law with the Islamic law. So I looked at the impact of Islamic law on the South African law of succession and how the laws of mirath and fara'id can then play within South African legal context and constitutional application and some of the challenges. Right. So that was my background as far as that is concerned. Right. So since I've come from Saudi Arabia and Syria prior to that, I then had to establish here back in Cape Town, South Africa, what do I do here as a career? And this is now my career journey, based on my knowledge as a scholar of Deen. Right? In 2001, when during my studies, in Medina, really, when I came down for the holidays, I then also started to become one of the imams at the local mosque in Highlands Estate, Masjid al-Rauf, and there I officiated as one of the imams. There's quite a number of imams and certain imams, and I was one of them. Yeah, I got a bit of training as well. I used to give some lectures there. And obviously, when you do study, you can impart of what you have learned under the tutelage, obviously, of some more senior scholars. And I also did a bit of counseling, right? And that is now the three things I do at the masjid from that time to date. So normally you have these issues with marriage problems and some where mediation has to take place, and we try to mediate these matters. So that was my, and currently is my career as an imam, applying the knowledge of what I've learned in Syria, Medina, um, and also in my legal career or studies. Now I can assist the mosque as well as the attendees with certain services. I then also became a member of the Muslim Judicial Council when I initially graduated in 2005 from the Islamic University of Medina. And I played different roles, right? Initially, I was a member, right? Wanting to learn, obviously, just a fresh graduate from overseas. And as time has gone by, I completed my law degree, and I could then offer a certain skill to the council. And I became an executive member of the Muslim Judicial Council. And because of the knowledge that I brought in, and also the Muslim Judicial Council, if you want to become an executive member, you can be an associate member also, which means a non-Aalim. But if you are an Aalim, you get certain other privileges, especially seeing that it is an Islamic institution or Islamic organization. So yes, I was an executive member for a certain stint of my career. And currently, I also head the legal desk. So in the Muslim Judicial Council, there are a number of desks and departments and so forth. And one of it is a legal desk, where we deal with legal matters concerning the Muslim Judicial Council. And there are magistrates in the desk, part of the desk, and attorneys and advocates and so forth. So as I'm quite young still, but I've been given the privilege currently of heading that desk. And because of my legal background, and also because I have a bit of Islamic studies behind my name, I could fulfill that requirement. I've also looked at my career, and I've last year, 2 years or few years back, I've been appointed as part of the Constitutional Committee, right? So in the Muslim Judicial Council, there's also a Constitutional Committee. We deal with constitutional matters, the constitution of the organization per se. So it would be good if you have a person who has also a legal background to know how to read certain terms and how to interpret certain matters. The interpretation in terms of Sharia is quite good, and also in terms of the law. And yeah, that is currently where I also sit. I've also been appointed as part of the Fatwa department. And as we know, the Muslim Judicial Council has a very good Fatwa department from graduates from various institutions. And I can also bring my Sharia background as well as my legal background when we have these deliberations. And under the department, we also have a Sharia court, and we have certain qadis. And I also serve as one of the ad hoc qadis of the Sharia court. So yes, the Sharia background and the legal background does fit nicely with most of these appointments. And obviously, these institutions have many other committees and desks and departments and so forth. But a scholar that has been well versed in Sharia and well versed in the law, I think would fit nicely into these departments.
Muneer,
I
if I can just maybe request on this particular point here, to give more insight, maybe by way of example, one or two examples on the role of the legal desk, for example. What can you maybe state one or two cases or matters that were dealt with at this level where you found that your the dual knowledge, your Islamic knowledge as well as your secular legal knowledge really gave you a step ahead of the rest when it came to dealing with those issues?
Yeah, I think that I can't actually mention the specific cases because some of the cases are very sensitive, but
Okay.
matters in the legal within the legal desk at least would come to the committee. It is of a legal nature, and obviously to be on the specific desk, you don't have to be a scholar or a graduate per se. So we have magistrates on there as well as advocates. And if an issue of Sharia does come there, then at least um, those who are quite, there are quite Sharia graduates, I think a few Sharia graduates on this committee, we can give input in that regard. And at times, we also refer the matter to the fatwa department for more specific a ruling in this regard. So it's more about understanding what the context is, and if a fatwa does come to the Constitutional Committee and we have to look at it from a legal lens, then we also know how to go about that in this regard.
Okay, exactly.
Then, yeah, that answers the question. And then also we have at least the council also is affiliated to the CRL Rights Commission. Right, so I've been nominated, at least by the Muslim Judicial Council, to sit on this Chapter 9 institution, which promotes and protects cultural, religious, and linguistic rights. And when the nomination had to be made, then the council itself also looks at the person that they are going to nominate, if they have a legal background and also have a Sharia background as well, because whatever they're going to be stating there is going to be on behalf of the Muslim community at least. Even though that the Chapter 9 institution, we are subject to the Constitution of South Africa, which also has the right to freedom of religion, the right to equality, and all of those things. So the nomination is then made, and the final appointment is then made by the President of the Republic. I'm sitting now for the second term. The last term was for 5 years, and I was renominated, and this is now my second 5 years on the commission. And yeah, things that approach this commission is like the Hajj matter, which was recently an issue of I think last year. And the current matter that is there is the regulation of religion in the country. And that is also something which will be in the media probably in the next few months as well. So it's good to have a Muslim inside there to give the Islamic law position on these matters. All right, so some of the other places I do find myself is seeing that I've graduated from Medina University. You studied Arabic there. The mode of the language is in Arabic. Coming back doing a law degree, you have a certain way of looking at text, especially legal text. So I would advise, encourage persons that have these qualities and qualifications, and to try to become a sworn translator of the High Court. So if you have the legal background, you are a lawyer or an attorney or an advocate, but you also have Arabic. The courts of South Africa actually require individuals that are versed in the technical nature, especially of Sharia contracts or just normal contracts in the Arabic language, translating them to English or from English into Arabic. So that is something which you could even make a career of. And this is something which I've done. I've been admitted as a sworn translator of the High Court when I returned, I think in 2014. And so there also I play a role. As far as the High Court of South Africa is concerned, as a qualified person with an LLB degree, you can either become an advocate, you can become an attorney, you can become a prosecutor. Myself, I chose to become an attorney of the High Court. I am admitted, and also the Legal Practice Council. So you have an admission number, you have a trust account, and all of those things. So you're able to actually be in on ground, on par with what's happening within the law, as you have clients, if you have it on a part-time basis, or even if you do it pro bono. All right. So that's something I found quite useful. In my practice, I then specialize in Islamic family law and succession law. Right? So I found the knowledge that I've learned in Medina and Syria, and also the knowledge I've gained in my law degree, I then apply it when I advise clients concerning matters of family law and succession, and also administering estates. Yeah, so I could specialize in many fields, but I find a liking in this part of the law. And obviously, any other person who goes, or Aalim that goes into this field, might find a liking for another part of the law, and then he should then, or she can then try to marry the two, the Islamic law perspective and the South African law perspective, and make things available that are Sharia compliant, or advise accordingly. Right. I also form part of the University of the Western Cape, and this is my primary work, or my day job. I'm currently an associate professor in the Department of Private Law, and that is also, I would think, what helped me a lot here was that background in Sharia law, or in Islamic law, or being a scholar, because there's not many scholars, there are some, but there are not many that have gone this way, and there's actually a gap, and also many opportunities for persons, especially as far as research is concerned in this field. So once I've completed my master's degree, I then applied to become a graduate lecturing assistant, where I did some tutoring in the law faculty. And I've taught a few law modules, but there's always the opportunity to then try to specialize. And I've been there for the last 10 years at the University of the Western Cape. And Alhamdulillah, then I've worked towards teaching family law. And more specifically, I tried to specialize in Muslim personal law. So I teach general family law to all the South African, to all the students at least that do family law. And then I say what is the position in terms of Islamic law, and that could be part of the module. I also teach the law of succession. Right? And that's what I taught in my doctoral degree. I've focused on the application of Islamic law in the South African legal context, Islamic law succession within the South African legal context. And under succession law, there's lots of cases that have gone to the various courts of South Africa. So there again, I go into that, and I also teach a bit, I make it part of the module, a bit of Islamic law of succession. And I find that the students find it quite interesting, because when they do go to practice, many people then come to them and ask them, I need a Sharia compliant will. What is that all about? And many times the legal practitioner has to send them to a Muslim attorney, and sometimes the attorney might not be that well versed. So if they teach this in the universities, at least be it the Muslim or non-Muslim, can at least give some guidance as to what this Sharia will is all about. So that's one of the benefits of having Islamic scholars within the law faculty in the various universities around the country. I also teach Islamic law as part of Muslim personal law in the undergraduate program. and Islamic law under the legal pluralism in the master's program, right? And again, there aren't many doctors and professors around the country that are teaching this. So wherever this is offered, we find that the students are quite interested in the subject matter, and also concerning the developments within the law. The Divorce Act has been amended. There's been cases gone to the Constitutional Court. There is some legislation that is proposed to regulate Islamic marriages. So we require scholars that are well versed in Islamic law as well as South African law to guide them accordingly, to say this is allowed or this is not allowed, and to say that even though the country allows for this, this is a Sharia perspective, and to advise them accordingly. I think as a researcher at university, my primary source of research is the application of Islamic law in Muslim minority countries, and there are certain perks in doing that as well. As you know, university at times has funding available. So I've gone to the United Kingdom, I've gone to India, Belgium, Mauritius, and many local universities around the country as well, to look at how they apply Islamic law in those countries, in those Muslim minority countries, in compared to South Africa. And then you try to then write a comparative analysis in a journal article, which goes for peer review. And once it has been accepted, approved after whatever corrections has to be made, and it goes into the public domain as an accredited journal and journal article. And that is something very, very, very good to have. And once you have published long enough, then you can become an NRF rated researcher. That's the National Research Foundation, where they rate their researchers. You make an application, and that then goes out to your peers, others who specialize in the same field. It could be nationally, internationally, around the world. And they look at what you have researched, and they look at the quality of your research, and they make a recommendation. The committee then sits here in South Africa as well, and they can rate you either as a Y-rated researcher, C-rated, B, or A-rated researcher. Right, so that is also one of the things that you could look towards as a scholar going into research at an institution of higher learning. Right. Also within the university, at least the Western Cape, I can say there is a Muslim personal law unit, and that unit basically is there to oversee the various courses in Islamic law within the Faculty of Law at the University of the Western Cape. So we have Muslim personal law, we have Islamic jurisprudence in the master's course, and this is also where there is a come together of a number of academics that, mostly Muslim academics, that have an interest in research in this field. Beyond that, there are also guest lecturing and community engagement opportunities. Once you have your Sharia background, you have studied further, you have your law degree, if you decide to go to your master's doctorate, even if you don't, you will become a specialist within an area where you are carrying both these sources of law. You can then give lectures at Masajid, on the radio station, on TV, on satellite. You can become a consultant at Islamic institutions or non-Islamic institutions, looking at Islamic finance, you're looking at investments and so forth. So the doors are wide open. Yeah, and the opportunities are endless. And yeah, that is my my presentation for today. I hope it has been of some assistance, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Muneer, for that detailed presentation. A few questions that we have. One being, what has been your experience of studying secular law after having being involved in the study of Islamic law through your Sharia degree?
Jazakallah for that question. I think one of the big differences or surprise or culture shock would have been to me, coming from an institution like the Islamic University of Medina, where there are only males and there's a certain culture there. Adhan goes off, it's now the time to make salah and everyone is Muslim. To move from that to an institution like the University of the Western Cape, it was a bit of a culture shock. And it was, yeah, that was quite different. However, how I managed to overcome that was I then became a part of the Muslim Students Association. And I then became the chairperson for a number of years and vice chairperson. And then I also, because of my background in Islamic studies, and also playing the two, I was in the law faculty, joined up with the Student Representative Council. And I was also, for one stint, I was the vice chairperson of the Student Representative Council. And we've done a number of changes or da'wah within the university. Yeah, but to answer the question, yeah, it was a big culture shock. And at least being part of a group of Muslims on the university that had similar objectives made it quite easier.
If we can maybe just go a bit more into detail on that question, when it reflecting on the specifics of the aspects of law, having studied some books of Islamic law or fiqh, how would you describe your experience getting some insight into the Islamic law perspective and then studying studying secular law thereafter?
Okay, yes. When I studied Sharia law, I've looked at usul al-fiqh, and we did the bidayah, what's it, Rawdatul Nadir or Junnatul Manadir. We looked at the Kitab, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas, and all of those things, and interpretation of the verses, ayat. I actually found it quite interesting when we looked at interpretation of statutes and legal text and how they do go about that. That is as far as interpretation is concerned. As far as the laws are concerned, the same applies here. Within the South African context, it was a bit, the issue was that even though we're looking at Islamic law, and Islamic law obviously is what we believe to be the right, the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, within the South African context, we have the constitution, which the country deems to be supreme. So everything there whatever has to be subject to the constitution. Where my mind came in was that we have freedom of religion, the right to freedom of equality. And because of my background, I used to argue, and many of my articles, which I then researched in my master's and doctorate, was looking at, but the South African constitution should then accommodate the right to freedom of religion. There should be accommodation and all of those things. Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, I found it difficult to see the differences between the two. But as far as the two laws are concerned, I see the one is quite secular in nature, based on the constitution being supreme, and challenges made to the common law, made to legislation, which was quite interesting. And what was also quite interesting was that there were many cases that have gone to the South African courts by Muslims, more specifically in Cape Town, especially when I started the Daniels versus Campbell case concerning inheritance, the Hassan versus Jacobs case concerning a fasq that took place at the Muslim Judicial Council, and also inheritance of a polygynous marriage, and so forth. So I found it quite interesting to see what is happening in the courts. And when I did my research further, I said, but what the courts are saying is not necessarily what Islamic law is saying. Then my research would then, or my recommendation should be that A, B, and C, in order to be Sharia compliant. That was my, during my studies at least, those were the things that happened.
Okay, alhamdulillah. A question that is more personal in nature, having looked at your studying career, which commenced back in 2000, and which extended for a period which you could say 20, almost 20 years, about 18, 19 years. until the culmination and completion of the doctorate degree. What kept you motivated and what gave you the courage to continue on this journey over these many years?
Yeah, shukran for that question. Yeah, I always saw that there were more opportunities available. So when I finished my law degree, I thought, well, let me go out and practice. But then I also wanted to teach, and I wanted to teach at institutions of higher learning, like the IPSAS or the Medina Institutes, here in Cape Town at least, to impart my knowledge. And then it was told to me, look here, right, that yes, you got another degree, but you also need to have a master's degree. You must at least be one step above the degree that you're going to teach, which makes sense. So to myself, I then thought, okay, but this is always going to be a problem if I would like to do this. And then I obviously firstly do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this would also be something that would upskill me as an individual. And when the opportunity came to do at the same time, then I remember the one Professor Fernandez came in and said, okay, there's a very good course here that will assist you also. It's a specialized course in transnational justice and crime prevention. And if you'd like to further your studies here, it's one of its kind. It's a center of excellence where the DAD program in Germany has brought it to South Africa, to Africa, and there's about 5 centers there. Then I made use of that opportunity. Yeah, and then from there, I found a love for research. And as I stated earlier on, I met up with the previous dean of the law faculty, and I wanted to then do something more within the specifics of application of Islam in Muslim minority countries.
Jazakumullah. We have a question here around, when it comes to the legal profession in general, and it may not be the fault of the majority, but lawyers tend to be looked at with a certain level of suspicion, by the general community for various reasons. And when you now looking at an Islamic scholar, an Aalim or a Maulana, and contemplating pursuing a legal career together with that. Maybe if you can just comment on how do we dispel some of the negative sentiments uh, around uh, around what it means to be a lawyer or legal professional.
Yeah, shukran for that, Maulana. Yeah, I would think it depends. Like I went into, even within my academic career, I do practice on the side where I look at family law and succession law. And in that instance, when a majority of the people who come to me are Muslim, I then give them guidance and advice in that regard. And the same, if any other person is a practicing lawyer, I would think the same should apply. If they are going to do something, they have to, if they're not a scholar by themselves, going to seek advice, is this allowed or is this not allowed? A simple example in drafting an Islamic will. If a client comes to you and says, I'm giving everything to my son, uh, yeah, and Islamically, you know that no, this person has parents, the person has a spouse, the parents, the person has other sons and daughters. That goes contrary to what Surah An-Nisa, verse 11 and 12 says. So in that instance, what do you do? Is it allowed for me as a lawyer to do so? And the same with criminal law. So if the lawyer is doing something which is going against Islam, then obviously there's something to say about that. But that can be done by a Muslim or non-Muslim lawyer. But if the person is applying his career in a manner that is in conformity with Islamic law, then I do not see any issue with that. That is my view.
100%. Jazakumullah. So to then maybe summarize the response to that is that there's plenty scope to do work in a manner that is positive and that will be of benefit to one and the Muslim community. So the negative, there are negatives, but those negatives arise from the negative behavior or character of specific individuals, and we cannot taint the profession with that.
Yes.
Sheikh, maybe moving on to the last one or two questions. Uh, if you were to, sort of give an indication compared to the need in your view and given your experience and your insight in this field, what would you say as compared to the actual need for Muslim scholars in particular to be involved in various areas of law? uh, 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 what would be the percentage of the unfulfilled need, looking at the current situation, uh, uh, and how many scholars are involved in the field, and what potential there is for more scholars to get involved to fill that gap, essentially, in terms of seeing to the interests of the Muslim community.
Yeah, shukran for that. I can only speak for the field or the niche that I'm currently working in. I would say there's a big need. If we, for example, were to just look at the in research in academia at conferences and those sorts of things happening here in the Western Cape, in other provinces, in other countries, where representation is sought. And then the people ask what's happening in your country. Those people who are at times giving opinions on Islamic law matters are not necessarily those who are well acquainted with Islamic law per se, and then also able to understand what's happening in the country. So it's either you find someone that does not know much about Islamic law and giving an opinion, and that is now in the academia space I'm speaking about, and that is now the perception that is going out there. And those are the articles that are being published, and those are the conference pieces and opinions that are being presented. But if, however, there are more scholars in that same arena, right, at conferences within the within the universities that are also studying these issues. In my specific space, the application of Islamic law in minority countries. These are issues that are faced not only here in South Africa, it's faced in the UK. There are currently cases happening over there in many countries around the world. And they're referring to what's happening here in Cape Town with that Women's Legal Centre Trust case. There's amendments to the Divorce Act, which governs Muslim marriages. So we require scholars that is well trained in fiqh, usulul fiqh, that is also well trained in fiqh al-aqalliyat, for those people then to apply their knowledge to the practical realities is what's happening over here. Within the legal space, obviously you get paid to research and that's what you do for a living, and they will thrive over there. So any Islamic scholar that is going this way and like to research, yeah, there's a big need for that.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Muneer, for your valuable insights and attending to the different questions that came from the audience. Inshallah, we will, with that, we've exceeded our 45-minute mark on this program, and we'd like to thank you for taking out your time on this Wednesday night, which coincides with the first night of Dhul Hijjah. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you in these blessed days. May Allah ease the plight of the Muslim Ummah, particularly in Gaza and in every other part of the world where we see our brothers and sisters suffering. Jazakumullah khairan to the audience for your attention and participation, and we look forward to your further engagement in our forthcoming sessions. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Muneer. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.